on this computer. Okay, so we're recording. Don't nobody say anything felonious. Not that you would. Okay, good. So we're going to start with the orientation. And here comes, okay, I'm getting a very busy screen. Ellington. Hi, Ellington. Where are you coming? There you are. Great. Hi. Okay, so we're just missing one that we weren't expecting not to be here. So.
And Mackenzie. I'm not sure if she's gonna.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to start with the orientation. I'll just say that the orientation should take 30 minutes. Yeah, it's going to be kind of quick. It'll be recorded and I'll put it onto a YouTube channel. And so if, God forbid going back and looking at something that's been presented, I know it always seems like a good idea, but nobody ever does it. But if you need to, you can. I think I want to encourage people to be challenging because I want you to look at this critically. So it's a pleasure for me to have a critical group because so many times people are reluctant to ask hard questions, and it's this notion. It's the norm of niceness, which we all have to overcome as Midwesterners. It's very important. The people at the Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice have one of their group norms is be kind, not nice. So you can be kind in how you say things, but you don't. Being nice is an impediment to really engaging. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's Midwestern life is full of niceness, and we want to avoid that. So I encourage you not to be nice, just be kind is plenty good. So, so be critical and ask questions. And I'm going to run through this, and then we'll have a chance to do it, to ask questions. I'm going to share my screen. Wow, I hit the wrong button here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go through it. It's a standard PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint? Okay, cool. There are certain parts of this PowerPoint that, okay, now it's live, are in pink. And that's the point that I want you to be ready to participate. So there's certain highlighted areas in pink. You'll see them. That indicates that I'm going to be asking you to say something about that. So. One of the reasons that I want to start this is why become an advocate. And there's a lot of confusion about what it means. And I think one of the important things is to realize that advocates are special and privileged people by nature of their calling, if you will. And advocates are respected people. Why are they privileged and special? Because advocates see and do things that most people don't see and do, such as how service systems work or don't work, and what their strengths and weaknesses are. Advocates make a difference in the lives of people, especially those, in this case, who experience mental health conditions. Advocates understand problems better than many other people because they've taken the time to really study and be critical and try to learn and listen. And advocates teach and help service recipients and service professionals. One of the mistakes that people assume is that because someone has a professional education, they know everything they need to know about what it is they're doing. And frequently, professional education only teaches them the concepts and the practice of the confines of professionalism, but it really doesn't teach them the point of view of the person who is experiencing those things, and that's what advocates do is relate the experience of what it's like. So consequently, advocates are respected. Now, that should make everyone feel like I want to be an advocate because I want to be respected and I want to be special and privileged. Why aren't there more advocates? And this is a question that really raised my understanding of this quite a lot. And because it took me years to really assume this kind of role. And this is the pink area you see. I'm just going to ask you a question in that pink area. Many people advocate without knowing it. And so you can advocate, you are all advocates because you have done it. You just don't think of it like that. So there's something that people do, but don't really aren't really self-conscious about it. Secondly, people sometimes doubt their capacity because they think advocacy is for experts, and that's the farthest thing from the case. You don't have to, you have to be educated and educate yourself about what you're advocating for, but you don't have to be an expert about it. And we can delve into that if that seems kind of paradoxical to you. The barriers to advocacy are sometimes really high. All accused in social situations say, go along, don't raise any kind of dust, don't raise any questions. Very few people in authority make it easy to advocate. So that's one reason. They just go along and get along kind of a situation. Secondly, many people don't want to be oppositional. And this is where I'm talking about be kind and not nice. Many people are taught very early in their socialization to be nice. And so niceness comes with a certain fluffiness and sort of go along attitude. And that's something that is a kind of barrier to being an advocate. It takes persistence to be an advocate, and sometimes it's really frustrating because you don't really see a lot of progress, and you just have to keep going even though you don't seem like you're making much headway. It takes knowledge, and the knowledge can be directed by the fact that you know something's not right, but you don't always see a way around it. So knowledge is the sense that something is wrong, something should not be the way it is, and you have to find out about that in order to advocate sensibly. Sometimes other advocates also don't make it easy. Sometimes you'll find your peer advocates for lots of reasons, get in your way. And so it's a bit difficult. So my question to you is what barriers relate to you in terms of advocacy? Have you experienced any of these barriers to being an advocate in what you've done, either with yourself or with your brothers and sisters, your family, your friends, etc.? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. Who said oh?
I did.
Caitlin, good.
Um,
Go for it.
yeah, the one under B is definitely me. Like, I don't like conflict, and I hate like bringing up conflict. So I always, I just keep my mouth shut and be
Yeah,
nice.
that's great. And there are ways you can be confrontive without being conflictual. So, there's ways around that, but I get it. That's good. Thank you. How about somebody else? Or maybe there's other reasons that you found there's barriers to being an advocate for
Me,
either yourself or for a social justice issue or for a friend or a relative or a family member, whatever.
I would say for me, can you all hear me? Yes. I would say for me, D, like it takes knowledge. Like something's not right, but you can't always see why. So sometimes like I'll know that something isn't right, but I know if I bring it up to somebody who's talking about it, they might not like think I'm a credible source because I'm not necessarily like knowledgeable on that subject, but I just know that like it's not right.
Great. Yeah, and the thing is, you don't have to know, you don't have to have all the answers. You can just come with with your perception. This is not right. why, do you think it's right? Is this the way everybody is treated? You can come with questions, and questions can be very effective prods for advocating, which suggests that you don't know everything. Explain to me why, somebody should get treatment differently than someone else. And so you don't have to, again, it's a way of turning the confrontation into, and if you're sincere and really saying, just tell me why you think you believe the way you do, or I'm trying to understand it. People will struggle with you. And you'll learn about what they think, and you'll learn, you'll get ideas about the things you need to know. So that's great. How about one more?
I was going to say that it can feel, I mean, going along with it takes knowledge part, and as well as sometimes it's frustrating, is that, especially when you're in, and this goes along with what you were just saying, is that, if you engage in any kind of conversation with somebody when there isn't quite, you don't quite see eye to eye on some kind of issue, when you don't have all the answers, and you're also you're getting frustrated because you don't have all the answers, but you're also frustrating the person that you're talking with, and you feel like now, you're actually making it worse because you're frustrating the person that, maybe you're trying to convince.
Yeah. One of the solutions to that, one of the tactics, if you will, for addressing that is to say, I really care, to imply or say just overtly, I really care what you think. Something seems wrong about this. I'm going to think about it, look it up, and we'll get back and talk later about it. You don't have to solve everything. It's not like life doesn't exist in a classroom where if you don't solve the thing in the 50 minutes of the class, you don't ever get a chance again. You can actually come back for a second dip and a second bite of the apple, if you will, and say, I don't know about this. Something seems wrong to me. I'm going to look it up. I have a relationship with you. I'm going to keep that relationship, and let's talk about this later. And that way people leave with the sense that you've made a bridge and you're not just, digging a trench, to mix a metaphor. So, okay, let's go on. 3 viewpoints helped me develop my sense as an advocate. First of all, we all advocate, and that there's many levels and forms of advocacy. We're going to get into that in a second. The second thing, it helps to work with others, and you need to know where to look for partners and opportunities. And we have our advocacy divided into sectors, places where you can learn and advocate, where the problems are clustered and different. And we'll talk about sectors in a second. And the third thing is that advocacy is a social role, that it's within organizations and ongoing groups and you need to know some of the norms and how to bend them. Now, I don't know how much you're familiar with the notion of a role, but a role is a position that you occupy that is not entirely yours. It belongs to an organization. People have expectations of you in a role. For example, your role as a son or daughter in a family. There's kind of norms about what sons and daughters are supposed to do. And there's expectations, and that can be changed within various family groups. And it's socially constructed. That is, it's different for one group than another, but they're very similar. Well, and it's an objective position. You occupy that position as a son or daughter, regardless of what you want. You are that, and you work within that role. So it helps to think of advocacy as a social role. It's a role we play, and it's not the only part of our lives. We are more than being a son and daughter. We are a friend. We are a student. We are lots of things. You can be more than a son or daughter, but it's an important part, and there are rules. It's a set of rules. So that's like advocacy is a social role. It helps to think of it as just a role you occupy, and you try to learn and do it better. It's not something that it comprises your whole life, if you will. Okay, so that we'll go on and plow through some of those. Here are the 4 levels and forms of advocacy. And if I had enough time, we'd go through each one of these, but I'm going to go through at the end and ask you what advocacy you've done and what level you've worked at most. First of all is the individual level. That is for you, yourself, and your loved ones. You know the people, you know what you've done, and you advocate for those people. And everybody does this. When you advocate for a grade with a professor, or when you advocate for yourself and say, I want to do, Creekmore, I want to do this in this internship, you're advocating for yourself. Everybody does that. The second level is a small group level where you can advocate for a class of people. So you might have done this in schools, in your schools or in your groups where you support the improvement of a program for a group, and you're advocating for this group that you know. And it's not just for you, it's for everybody else as well. So that's the second level. The third level is a little more abstract, and that's for a population of people. And these people you may not know. These are people like when you advocate for women, or for your advocate for against racial disparity and for equity. You're advocating for a population of people, and many of them you don't know. The millage, for example, in Ann Arbor is a campaign for housing, and it's for people who are housing insecure. I don't know hardly, I mean, I know a lot of people who live in supported housing, but this is for a group of people I don't even know. And this is, at a certain population of people. And then there's the highest level, which is the macro level, which goes across all these sectors. And for example, has to do with a law or a statute. And that's really where you have the most abstraction, like a public policy or a law. So 4 levels, different levels, different experiences with who you're advocating for and who your audience is. So Sam, you haven't said anything. Where have you advocated? Which one of these levels do you have as an example? Could you give us?
I was actually just thinking on an individual level. I'm remembering an instance where my old hairdresser was like very kind-hearted, and she had a very open mind, but she was also very conservative and ignorant about a lot of things. And I was able to, like, when I was with her, I just kind of talked about a lot of things that I was learning in school, like specifically the occupancy of like Palestine by Israel, or like different social justice movements. She was like an anti-vaxxer, and I talked to her about that. Yeah, and that was actually like those are all pretty heavy topics, but I was able to talk to her about that in such a way that like did not. We would leave each other, and there was no animosity. And
that's really interesting, because you were advocating, if you're talking about vaccines and the vaccination issue, you're advocating for a macro level. I mean, you're advocating vaccinations cover all sectors of life and society and have a tremendous effect on public health. Or if you're talking about Palestine, you're really talking about a population level of the people in Palestine, perhaps, or maybe you're talking about colonialism and the effects of a colonial occupation. And so that's more at a kind of population level. Maybe I'm just riffing on that. So, Layla? Is that right? I always feel like I'm not going to pronounce your name right. I hope I got it right this time.
Yeah, my name is Layla.
Layla, okay. How about you?
I guess one form of advocacy would be like going to protest, and that would be population.
Okay. And And so give me an example of one that you've been to lately,
Black
just
Lives
as
Matter.
just a for instance, you know.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter.
Okay, so that's more like at a population level, isn't it? It's about a certain group of people. You know a lot of people in that population, but you don't know everybody. And so let's just say that's as an example. So, okay, let's not belabor this. We'll go on. But it helps to know that you can do advocacy at all levels, and almost everybody does some advocacy. So we talked about sectors. This is really useful for us because we have understand that we advocate in these 6 sectors. Now there's going to be more sectors, but this is just NAMI. First of all is the mental health sector, which has to do with the safety net and people who are seriously mentally ill. That's an obvious one. Community mental health is one of our biggest, we do a lot with community mental health. Now, let me back up. These sectors are places where we have different populations of people, different problems, and to tell you the truth, different rules. They're covered by different rules. So the mental health sector is people with serious mental illness and moderately mental illness. It also concerns people who are, you're talking about prevention before they have symptoms, but it's also has to do with the funding sources, and these funding sources they have certain rules that they have to follow. And so, for example, there's a lot of privacy issues that have to be maintained. That's a whole set of rules. There's a whole eligibility criteria. There's a whole set of rules around eligibility. So these rules are different than the other sectors. The health sector is the second one. That has to do with primary healthcare, emergency healthcare, and hospital care. You know, I don't, or maybe you don't know that people who have um, chronic illnesses like diabetes have very high levels of mental health conditions. So this is an area where we go to find people who have mental health conditions. For example, University of Michigan has, I believe, 13 chronic care clinics. And in all those clinics, they have a very high level of mental health, depression, anxiety, and stress. And they have to deal with that. And they have a whole set of, they provide mental health services. 40% of the people who are diabetic have serious depression. So it's a place that we know when we go to emergency rooms and hospital care that we're going to find a lot of people who have mental health conditions, and that's one place that we work. The criminal justice sector is another sector. It has to do with crime and social order, and that population is a completely separate population from the mental health and health sectors, and that's where we go to find people also under incredible amount of stress who are really sometimes committing not crimes but committing violations of social order, like vagrancy, refusal to move on, things that are not felonious, but will get you put in jail. And then if you act out and you strike an officer or you actually yell and become obstreperous, then you are prone to arrest. And so sometimes those issues of social order merge over into criminal accusations or complaints. So the criminal justice sector is another area where we do a lot of work. We do work in the mental health court, and we do work in the jail with educating people on mental health. A lot of people with mental illness and mental health conditions end up in criminal justice system. Big problem. The education sector, which I think we're all most familiar with, has to do with prevention. For example, teens and parents, and preventing people from getting serious mental illness. A classic case is depression among young people that can lead to suicide and self-harm behavior, as well as substance use disorders, etc. And dieting and all kinds of health issues that connected with mental illness in the education sector. It's a place where you can do early intervention and prevention of serious problems. And I think we've all had experience with that. So that education sector, again, has different rules for accessing people who work and live there, and there's completely different population than the criminal justice sector. But similarly, they have a lot of use of mental health services and need for education and support. Housing and basic needs has to do with the social determinants of mental illness. So, for example, you cannot really if you are housing insecure, you're under an incredible amount of stress. I'm sure you have felt that if you've ever experienced housing insecurity, and being a student is almost the definition. One expects to be housing insecure. You never know from one year to the next where you're going to be living or who you're going to be living with. Sometimes that's extremely stressful. And so that's a place, housing insecurity is the reason NAMI has become so supportive of supportive, affordable and supportive housing, because that people who have been homeless and have a housing insecurity are very likely to be people with mental health conditions. And then the last is a voluntary community sector. NAMI is a voluntary community organization like churches, and churches are areas and house worship, places of worship are places where people have a lot of people have mental health conditions. And getting churches to help us educate people about mental health is really is an ongoing struggle, but every person who's involved in a church knows that that's the case. That you find a lot of people under a lot of stress with a lot of mental health conditions. So those 6 sectors are the places that NAMI goes to look for partners for mental health education and support groups. We look for access to their populations, and we address the needs of those people. And they're all separate populations. You can see old, young, voluntary communities, church sectors like churches are sometimes more old than young. Sometimes criminal justice is more young. They're certainly disproportionately African American, and that has a social justice component to it, and then education is largely a young population. So you can see how the populations and the sectors differ in all kinds of ways. And that really helps us find who we're going to partner with. So I want to share with you some of the things that we've done. This is going to take more than half an hour, but what the heck. I'm going to share with you another screen. Hold on a second. Got to get this guy out of the way here. Here we go. So do you see this screen? It's a spreadsheet. Yeah, cool. So this spreadsheet has, I got to move this guy back here. You're in the way, buddy. This has column A is the name of the activity. Column B is the year we started, and C is the year it ended, if it did end, and D is the sector. So MH stands for mental health. I've tried to organize these by sector. I found this was a mistake, and I changed it so it's not reorganized. But basically, we're involved in 4 basic areas of service as a sector. most of them have to do with housing, as you can see. So that's 4 things that we're currently involved with and have been since 2015. The criminal justice sector, which are these rows, we did in 2002, which was, how many years is that? 18 years ago. We did training for police for 2002 to 2004 to de-escalate crises with police. We went to international conferences. We worked on prisoner reentry from people from prison. We became engaged with the mental health court in 2014, and we're now involved for the last 5 years in the diversion council and diversion planning. Diversion means diverting people who don't belong in criminal justice away into other services, away from criminal justice. The millage, this is, criminal justice and mental health. This is a combination where the public safety and mental health millage was done in 2017, and we're currently very engaged in this combination of criminal justice and mental health. These are just some things that NAMI's advocacy has been involved with. A lot of mental health engagement and some health engagement as well. So I'm not gonna go through all of this. I just want you to see that it ranges over a long period of time, and we're active in all these sectors. Okay, enough of that. So that's a partial list. So the question is, and here I'm going to get down and ask you about some stories. The question that I want to put to you, or the point I want to make here, is that NAMI is unique in its advocacy because NAMI is a grassroots membership organization of people living with and their supporters. That means everybody in NAMI is either a person who has a mental illness or is a person who has lived in support of someone with a mental illness. Myself, I lived in support of my parents, both who had they were never diagnosed with depression, but they had post-traumatic stress disorder and depression as a result of that. And I lived with this my entire life. And I only, it helps me to, to know this because this has been a defining character in my life. I'm currently now working with my wife's nephew and niece in Florida who have very serious mental illness problems and are facing homelessness and the rest. So it's very common. I would be surprised if that there's actually any family which is free from serious mental health condition, and you don't have to reveal. We're not asking anyone to reveal. But when you go to a NAMI meeting, people will say, "Hi, my name is such and such. I'm living with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, etc." People, that's how they'll introduce themselves. And that's who NAMI is. All NAMI programs are experiential and performed by volunteers and not by professional treatment staff. So everything that we do is done by peers. The people who do family education are people who are family members who have direct lived experience with their loved ones having mental illness. And the people who do peer-to-peer education with the people who have mental illness are people who have serious mental illness themselves. So it is a peer organization. NAMI is about, the second reason we're unique is that NAMI is about experiences and stories. And the real message there is you are not alone, because people in NAMI are like you, and we understand stories. We all have stories. We all tell stories, and stories are not only important, They are very powerful. They change in people's minds and they motivate people. They give listeners who listen to the story contact with people that they normally never have contact and with, and educate them about mental health. And so those are just two of the reasons stories are so important to NAMI. That's not to say that data and analysis of data is not also important, but the unique quality that NAMI brings is its stories. So I want to ask you, what stories are important to you? Why are stories important to you? And what do you think about this notion of a story as being important?
I think like with this kind of work, you know, like you can see facts and figures and stuff, and that's great. But I feel like with this type of work, you know, it takes a lot of empathy, and sharing stories brings out like the human aspect of it, and you know, just listening to other people's stories evokes empathy, at least for me, and it makes me like reflect on like my life and my experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, that's very, very important. There's a great article in the New York Times today about empathy. I just put it on the Slack application. Uh, um, Empathy is empathy, you know, is a very recent concept. The word was first used in 1909. So, and it actually became into our lexicon in 1970. There's a very young history for empathy. Think about that. That's really an interesting thing. We really didn't have, my parents did not grow up with the notion of empathy. And we have that as central to our understanding of who people are, I think. Who else? Why are stories, can you give me an example of a story that's important to you that you've heard that's made you realize something you didn't know, or that you actually have told that explains something about yourself?
I can go. There was a story that was told from a police officer in my high school, and it was like for a senior assembly, and it was really interesting because we came in and we thought it was gonna be like a fun day of just like whatever assemblies, not doing any work, and so it seemed like it was gonna be an exciting day, and the officer started telling his story, and it was a story about a drunk driver hitting his family when he was off duty, and he talked about how he had to pull his daughter's body out of the car, and he could tell, as an officer, he could tell immediately, like when he went and looked at her, he could tell that she had passed away, and she was like 3 years old. And I could feel a shift within me, and I could feel a shift within the entire, like our entire senior assembly. Like you could feel the mood in the room physically change, and that was something that like strongly impacted me. Like I always knew drunk driving isn't good. You shouldn't drunk drive. Drink and drive, but that was something that was so impactful to me that I can still remember the feeling that I got when I heard that story, and the feeling that I felt in the room when we all heard that story. So that's, to me, stories are really important because, like Caitlin was talking about, it brings a more human aspect, and it's not just like listening or reading facts. It's feelings that are also involved with that story.
Yeah, thank you for that. That brings a lot of reactions to me. I mean, I really have a lot of reactions just to hear you talk about a story about somebody else, you know. How about one more? Chris, give us a story.
You know, I really can't think of any stories exactly off the top of my head. Actually,
Okay.
but what I was going to say was that there have been a lot of times in my life where I just wasn't getting it. Like I just wasn't getting a concept, or I just wasn't getting, you know, or I was looking at the data, or I was looking at the numbers and I wasn't understanding it. But as soon as I heard somebody's perspective, it really, really did a lot to change how I viewed the situation, and to really spend time to sit and think about
you know, in the one that came to my head was, this is so random, but in one of my first writing classes, I was learning about like Chicana culture, and I just was not understanding the concept of like identifying like identity, or like I was just struggling. And when I just was just really struggling with it. And then as soon as I heard somebody's perspective in their story, it just really changed my perspective. But I wouldn't have been able to, no matter how much debating I did with people or talking to people, it just, so I really do relate to the
That's a
story.
great example. Thank you for that. Because the notion of social identity is complex, and we all have many social identities, and they sometimes can only be told in relation to stories and examples. So that's great. Thanks. Okay, so we're near the, oops, darn, what did I just do? Go away. Okay. So I want to leave, this is right near the end, if not the end. NAMI is a supportive group. It's many things. It's a supportive group of people, people who have shared experiences, and you often find those divided into people who live with mental illness as a diagnosis, and people who live with people who have mental illness. And but so it's a very supportive environment. It's a movement which has had many stages and really developed like relatively recently in our society, coming out of like Alcoholics Anonymous is another form of movement of people with peers who lived with shared experiences, non-professional help and support. Our movement came out of the institutions for mental illness and developmental disabilities, mental health institutions, which were mostly closed down in Michigan in the 80s. But I have very vivid memories of institutions, none of which exist now. There's not even a damn marker as to where they were, but they occupied, they consumed people's lives, and they were a major force in mental health movement, the movement of mental health from institutions to the community. And our NAMI is an organization, and it has its own rules and norms. For example, we're a nonprofit tax exempt group with an active board. We're restricted from partisan activities. Everything we do goes to the board, blah, blah. They're all kind of rules. Not complicated, but important. We apply our mission through here's some kind of way we do things, not rules, but this is a way of operating. We work in partnerships in these 6 sectors. We do nothing alone. So we are always working in partnerships with other organizations and people. We have a mixed focus on mental health conditions and mental illness, and that's to say prevention and mental health conditions which are may not have merged into mental illness, but also serious mental illness with very serious consequences. So we have a mix of approaches. We try to be as culturally sensitive as possible to the various conditions that people have, including race, age, gender, etc. And it's a struggle. We struggle with this, as all our organizations, all the organizations that I know of do. But that is one of the guidelines and approaches and one of the set of norms that we try to do, because if we're not culturally sensitive, we're not listening to people, we're not really, we can't really do our job. And we're careful and responsive in both setting our planning and priorities. So we try to be very intentional. So that's some of the norms and rules of NAMI. And you know the 4 areas that we're focusing on: schools, which has to do with prevention, early intervention, especially around COVID. COVID is just the most remarkable experience in my lifetime. And I think in several generations, we're going to be struggling with COVID for many, many years as a public health crisis. Criminal justice is another area where we have a very high priority and toward diverting people from criminal justice system. We're focused on the affordable and supported housing millage, something coming up very soon, and because housing is so important. And we're doing a candidate survey on mental health issues, which has to do with community education. So those are our 4 priorities, as you already know. Our advocacy, we think of it as a role which is grounded in very specific skilled activities: engaged listening and observing and reporting. We're going to do some training on how to be an engaged listener, and all of us have a responsibility to observe and report back what we observe to our fellow NAMI people. We focus, one of the other skills that we engage in is focused reflection, learning, and absorbing. NAMI is a learning organization, very similar to the educational institution you guys are involved with, which we try to focus the reflection, learn as much as we can about these issues, and absorb it and try to come up with some kind of response to it. So we're always studying. That's just the way it is. And third, it has to do with stories, and we will actually go through a training for advocacy stories, and you'll participate in that. So you'll be learning all these skills to the degree that we can train you and help you learn them. And that's what grounds us in the role of as an advocate. So, okay, that's the end of presentation. I feel like I've been on the pulpit, and so now I want to get some reactions from you all about, first of all, was this useful? You now have a better idea about what we're doing with advocacy and NAMI. You heard about NAMI as an organization last time from Pat about all the programs we do. Then we focus now today on advocacy. So is this what you expected it to be? Are you surprised or disturbed or pleased?
I thought this information was very helpful. I think that I don't feel surprised or disturbed, but I do think that this has been definitely like informative as far as like the philosophy that NAMI is guided by. So I'm glad to be here, and yeah.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So I wanted you to be critical too. So what do you think? Where are the pressure points? Where are areas where you see, oh, I'm not so sure about that, or I want to know more about that, but maybe it doesn't agree with what I think. Any pressure points or sensitive areas?
I have a question.
Sure.
Has there been any concern about the advocate the sessions where people are telling their stories, it not being mediated by like a health professional?
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, all of our programs have a potential vulnerability by triggering people, if you will, who have into a crisis. And so every part of the training is to help, is to have the capacity to respond if that occurs, and to know something of what to do. And it's not really that difficult because there are, for example, in the education programs or the support groups, they're always done with 2 people. And if one person needs to take someone aside who is really, has a lot of hot button issues, is in crisis, they can take them aside and help them. So yes, there's a real concern about that. You know, but people go into all NAMI's programs knowing that we're not professionals, so we're not going to you know, we're not going to engage in any kind of professional treatment, but we will, you know, but there will be kind of an immediate response if there's a crisis. A lot of it has to do with preparing people ahead of time with the expectations. So in some of the programs, for example, we will screen people who maybe have they're not sufficiently capable, that maybe the level of sensitivity or concern or degree of crisis is so high that we don't think that they're going to really work in it. And so we'll screen them and say, you know, we're really you know, you need to come back and let's talk later, but you know, we're not going to let you join the group. In other words, there's sensitive ways of doing that. But in the storytelling, we talk very clearly about consent, about how stories need the kind of story we're looking for is a story that has a lot of emotion to it, but is not overwhelming. So we try to steer people away from being expressing an overwhelming level of emotion in telling their story. I've never had anyone actually with having set that context ever go overboard and get overwhelmed. But that is an issue, and it's an excellent question, Chris. And sometimes you just have to say, we don't think you're really ready for this, or this is the right place for you. But in storytelling, I've never had the problem, and I've had some pretty strong emotional, I mean, no one really breaking down, but there's a lot of, but we try to talk about at a level that's not overwhelming. That's a great question. I'm going to think about how to answer that better.
Yeah, I only asked it because I'm an EMT. I'm like kind of, you know, I've been wondering, you know, which path I should be going down. And so I just know because I'm looking at like programs and stuff that even if I just want to do clinical work, like at least a year or more of specific training to even be able to get into the door to do like support group work. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, it's very different support groups when they're done by peers than they're done by clinical people. And peers the peer support group, I've been through the training for the peer support groups, and there's a kind of, what you do is start out with a kind of check-in and say what are issues that people are concerned about. If one of those issues tends to be really a hot button issue, then there are ways of handling those hot button issues that people are trained to address, to diffuse them. And then if it's really, if the person's incapable of not engaging, then the second person will say, let's talk separately. And it really rarely happens because, and then there's training around that NAMI does for the support groups. There's 2 days of training. And one of the things that the support group does is to rely on shared experience. So you'll say, you know, so-and-so, a typical hot button issue would be an arrest. That will always be something that will be treated very seriously if a person says they've been arrested. Then talk a little bit about that, and then they'll say, who else in the group has had an experience like this? and then it'll turn it over to the group to discuss their experiences. So really all you're doing is sharing experiences. You're not solving problems. So that's an important distinction. It's a really deep question and something that the training deals with quite extensively. So thank you for that. Yeah. Other reactions or concerns or niggling little, gosh, I don't know if that's right, kind of feelings.
I was just wondering how like this has changed since, you know, things have been moved to basically like all online formats. And how effective do you still think like the sessions that you run on Zoom are, and like how is the human aspect still able to be present in a Zoom space?
Yeah, I think we're all just learning. I think we're all learning. And I think in some cases it's been made easier. And this is what people have told me when I've done trainings of the storytelling training. One of the people who was from Grand Rapids said, you know, I have PTSD and I can't sit still for very long. And I find this kind of training really helpful because I can get up and move around without disturbing the rest of the group. And it's in a place that I'm comfortable with, so I don't have to worry about a strange environment. And he says, that's easier for me in this particular case. And of course, there will be situations which will be harder. For example, in some cases, and we're really trying to be very sensitive to this, is that people who live with a lot of other people, you know, or other, you know, like dogs and cats and barking dogs and crying children, for example, or you know, teenagers or whatever, who could be emotive and disruptive. Sometimes it's hard to do the kind of work for education and support and remotely when they're in the next room. I don't know if you guys you all have dogs, but whenever my dog sees a squirrel, he just goes off the deep end and starts barking, and all of a sudden I have to say, excuse me, mute the thing and go calm him down. So anything that's disruptive, any environment that's disruptive is going to be harder to do the kind of work we do. So finding a good place to do it is important. Another thing that we're struggling with is the access to technology. We're looking at purchasing a lot of Chromebooks and notebooks, you know, $200 to $300 things, because we cannot afford, if you will. Oh, I'm sorry, this thing is still up there. I'm going to stop the sharing. I'm sorry. We cannot afford to only serve and help people who have the technology and the knowledge. We have to make it accessible. So we have to figure out ways to that it's not a barrier. Am I still on Facebook? Somebody wave or something. Okay, good. Sometimes my thing goes out. So that's some of those are some barriers, Ellington. Good question. And absolutely, there are barriers. It seems to be we have fewer cancellations because of this remotely. I mean, people can get on easier, but there are some limits as well. And we just are not, I'm not sure. The technology thing is a big question. I was just working on that last night. And you know, schools are distributing thousands of notebooks with hotspots. And so if they can do it, we can do it. But it's a challenge. Yeah. So we're at noon now. I really want to say I sent you all a survey trying to get at your interest in which area you're interested in, and I really want you to send them back, and that'll be this topic of discussion for the next meeting. I hope this is an okay time and place, and I'll put this on a YouTube channel, and I don't want to hold people over, but I am available further. So if people have to go, they should feel free about leaving now. And I want to tell you that I'm accessible to you if you want to talk about any of this further, about either what you might be interested in doing to focus, because it's really important that you choose something that's going to be meaningful to you in these 4 areas. And there may be some other areas that we could talk about that aren't in these 4 areas. Anybody have any questions and want to talk about this some more?
I know Maggie told me that she works regularly at this time, so unless we can find a time
Okay.
that we could change for everyone else, I know she won't be able to make these meetings.
Okay. What do you suggest, Caitlin? How can we do a doodle poll?
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, it's an application which allows scheduling. It's a poll, you know.
I feel like it's going to be hard to find a time that like every person can attend. Because
Yeah.
this seemed to be okay, but
Yeah, I am literally very flexible. So we could do it in the evening. We could do it, you know, I'm less pleased about early morning, but I could do it.
okay.
So really, I'm open, and we should decide soon.
Okay, I'll send something out and find people's availability for like a different time.
Yeah, Doodle is a free Doodle. Have you all used that? It's oh gosh, you mean it's something that I've done that you haven't? I'm astonished. It's an easy one. It's just a way of checking off times that you're free. And there's others applications that are similar. That'd be great if you could help do that. So.
So are you thinking we'll start getting like going next week then? Because I know Adrian said that like we can start working on the hours this week, but do you
Yes.
think like
yeah, I'm going to once I get your surveys back about the areas you're interested, I will send you material and sort of orient you individually to areas.
Okay.
I really want to talk with each of you separately, so if you could include your phone number and wouldn't mind me, I will always text before I call to make sure that it's convenient, but I would like to talk individually with each person, and that would be helpful for me. And there's also, I also signed you up on Slack, which is an application. You should have been notified. And all the areas are identified in Slack, and we can go over those at the next meeting to show you the kinds of things that are posted. And if you want to get a history of what each area is engaged in, you just read that Slack, what's called a, what the heck is it called? Channel. They call them channels. So just read all the information in the channel you're interested in, and that'll be a good orientation.
Okay.
I will put all of this in an email, and as a kind of after this, as well as the YouTube. Let me just write that down to make sure I do. And give you the YouTube, so if people want to. If who was it was missing? Did you say Megan?
Maggie and Mackenzie.
Maggie. so they can go and to the YouTube channel and view this. Okay, great. Okay, that's helpful. How about Ellington or Lauren, or do you have any questions or observations? Don't be shy.
No, I don't think I have anything right now, but
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, great, great. All right, then we're done, and I'll get you an email right out right away, and we'll follow up.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right,
Okay.
bye.
Bye-bye.